단위 담으시는 가다주는 이제는 대신로를 잡아 강화소다 딘제베 최기점에게 년바대바대단데 라에게다 로던지게 좀모나다 메에게는 로하군이라게 지자바 탐제게도 나게 최된도 관계되지 로저 거보면 만지면 봐 집으면 받아면 봐 받아들이면 주변이 시대 봐서 버상 만남제도 받아라 장제로 시제가라 여러 경우에 제배우는 뉴젤레나 뭐 야외된 부분에서 제가 그 유럽 보시나 장제로 번호로 자와르고 조나마 가마 이거로 인준에서 제배 이단을 좀 칠레 군이 제로 완전 좀 배서 내주제 부분 던데면도 용라서 반대서 나마를 보세요. 당에서 우리면 되죠라 그래 집에 보내지. 구성도 영어로 자도 다되네. 마제지들 다가장기만 그래 모두니만 쉬빈 지금의 로성도 대나 추억을 숨 토보 생그 댄종 대화 동세 피봉 충우레 젤와 포르부 잠느 조부 매자 크부 절루 잠레 롱주도 미제시 도나 크라 차장지기 로추 녜두 기타반 대와르네 뉴브 좀된데 기간 두안의 시에진 대마도 세 쇼강도 롱바 차차르 미두 세 야럽도 총의 송대 제친제 대세를 미딘 까메바 인별 로소다 최종보다보다 카사다 쇼롱도 톱긴 자와다 보면 류초의 제도 수용병 안자 벽원에란데 초와 차주인데 개체 지르긴두기 대라쇼나 긴두지라 세 수용 유표마도 라버첸데베 내려세와의 신부제수즈부터비 유연체도 밀림반데 개체 라브라라메 거런데 신두지 첸데베 세고 용우르부터 초공우르라 기세베 라메 까네 체나마도 론주에도 미두 라르 곰젠바 베세체완데 영원신표마도 지름 유규 체르메베 잉나라 마가 된기자와 마다베 응어부기 봉한데 개체베 샤장 천자 고자 큰김 서신 총기 분기 쉐마 케마 쉐바 케마 쉐마 로드 제반데 메봉 까메벤데 님보를 지경 개시 자와라 개종도 셰베 최시 초라 라르미주 셰와라 라르미시 창주게 라르미주 되게 라르미디 번디시고 찍도 개시야 라르 뉴지 마다바 나라 카즈인데 중년체 대 남중원의 펜준도 찍이질라 차세는 거 동샤 주당 제니 이견 분들이 찍이 안 되면 받게지 다들 조디 라브도 정원들을 공부 인반장도 님비는 가시 다 르준다 김바 보면 참여 냠레시 줘봐 인사
And so to continue from where we left off yesterday, the text reads, "Therefore do not use anything other than the 3 dharma robes, a shirt, sen, small cushion, mat, alms bowl, small notebook, pitcher, cup, tsampa container, small tent, tinder, needle and thread, and a clay pot. All of your clothing should last 6 years. The Buddha taught this in the Vinaya as a way to abandon the extreme of austerity and live comfortably. Other than those, you should not keep anything worth more than a gold show coin. For the food you eat, once you have taken the form of a monastic, there is no way not to rely on the food from the faithful. So do not lead a wrong livelihood, such as selling the Dharma, engaging in flattery, praising another's things to get them, or evaluating how much profit you can get from something. In order to support their body, an almsman should request alms in a pleasant voice. This manner...
More close to Mac.
Is this better? Oh. This manner of seeking your livelihood is important. Even if you live in a monastic community, you should only accept food offered as alms for the Sangha in general. It is important not to specifically accept offerings such as those given for the sake of dispelling illness in this life or taking care of the deceased. Offerings to the Lama in particular are especially weighty. The accomplishment of clothing and food for this life makes obstructions for the supreme accomplishment, so unless the Lama insists, you may not use them. Though we great meditators may crave books, they do not have any blessings to receive other than increasing our fixation on things, so do not be too fond of words on paper. The main point is that it is important to give up the 8 impure things: meat and alcohol, weapons, armor, houses, property and fields, business and investments, riding and pack animals, and livestock. There is no choice but to give these up, so the antidotes for each of these are important. Fundamentally, there are 4 qualities that make a spiritual person: not returning anger for anger, not returning an insult for an insult, not pointing out faults in return for one's own faults being pointed out, and not returning a blow for a blow. These 4 alone are important, but there is a great danger that we who have not purified the afflictive obscurations will get into arguments. If that should occur, it is important to prostrate to each other and then recite the confession of downfalls 10 times aloud. Later, recite as many 100 syllables as you can, 100,000 or 10 billion. Now in this, these are primarily instructions for monastics, but there are a few points that apply to both monastics and lay people.
다 가르쳐요. 신다도 좀 미생에 사스케면도 가르스나 아니 다지 세수념을 줘봐다 그 세고 영원성 초시해봐다 너나 세고 병 영원성 초시해서 뭐보다 디디 이미자 지다다 초시해야 돼 계십시다 이미자 라바르도 딘상 뒤줄이야 이런 아주지 가르쳐야다 쿠유기 강에 망부십시 체대기 아래 다띵 아주 가르쳐서는 전부린 차상 가르쳐요. consumerism, somewhat consumerism. 다 가르쳐는데 벽에리아다 제주에서도 제주기 배 진로 대 타격침을 주고요 인상 안디 균센 때네 아니 가르쳐다지 점블링기 정중기 natural resources 정중기 아니 땡외사란다 땡주사란다도 다 디디 아니 가르쳐에 용도 주고요 비치당 아니 민보르체로 주고요 봐 정중기 땡외라 다나신기 미기 다 뇌암 체로 주고요 봐다 임비 이내양 아니 정중기 땡외데 체진지래 limitations some of they have limitations 다 이내양 아주 미기 뇌발이야 체심해야 인상 진 고라 도스바 데베 망온 봐도 봐 런신 당하시는 오메스게요 말에 소수 컨트롤 시에는 마도 제상 디균센 때는 다지 진짜게 아주 가수다 sustainable somewhere 균싱 투베기 안에 다 간다 초알이야 가수에 아주 균싱 투바 내가 베지 마음발이야 푸경진부 미르리야 푸경진부기 푸섬이야 진짜게 베 초하게 거야디 다 계심을 주제샤 되는 유디 균센 되네 대양 아주 지금 잡도 총회는 라도 김바이는 라도 참에 도섬 시야고야지 계심부지 차대 유설성도
Now, about much of this, there's nothing to say in particular, but In terms of one area, whether we're thinking about our food or clothing and so forth, it's important for us to be satisfied with the food and clothing that we have. It's important for us to have the quality of contentment, being satisfied with what we have. These days, we have many difficulties in the environment. And the reason we have such difficulties is because of the consumer culture that we have in this world. This culture of consumerism is causing the world problem. And because of this, the natural resources available in the world are decreasing. And yet at the same time, the desires that we humans have are increasing. They always increase, but the natural resources have a limit. Natural resources have a limit, but human desires have no limit. And so in this way, if we do not control our desires, if we do not match our desires to the natural realm or control them, the only thing we can do to protect the natural resources in the future is to control ourselves. And so it's important for us to lead a sustainable lifestyle and to continue leading a sustainable lifestyle. And so in this way, when we are leading we have to have a long-term view that thinks about our lifestyle and whether it is sustainable from generation to generation over the long haul. It is important for us to lead our lives so that that will be possible. And so whether we are monastics or whether we are lay people, it is something that all of us need to consider.
대상 다디 되는 뭐 계속 다 디퀄이야다 망부지 시안도데 다 참말로 다들 시에는 미세 고반을 게 통면도 다 되면 다 돼야 마다베 응어버 게 송돼야디 니나로 송베 마다베 응어버 게 송도와 다 돼야 담보 마다베 응어버 게 송고야 그 균제 지需要的重松 다 디네 디제래야 마다베 응어버 게가 나네 샤다 창게 고려야 도두지 쉬비미나 야부면도 something.
There's a lot that could be said about this, but right now I don't see a particular need to speak about it too much at the moment. Now, another thing that is mentioned here are the 8 impure things. And so there's a reason why these 8 impure things are discussed here. And so I'd like to say a few words about the 8 impure things. And in particular, among these 8 impure things, I'd like to talk about one of them, meat and alcohol.
대안의 상기 좀 된 데기 ane tabuga yug dembe sunje je gambo pa ta lung dembe kablia ta lung dembe do phaji nisumji yare tindiji nane lung dembe kablia maung balya ane kyorang khorleya ane garjweda ti khorleya ane madabe ngobo yedan chewa yungores Tindiji lungdenchi yor. Tindiji lungdenchi yor yinbi yinzang, di yunzin dene, tadi madabi ngobo ye sungwa di, tindiji draba chadi yores. Da tendrabi madabi ngobo ye di tang jendang la, madabi ngobo ye ngunzin chedang la, yang timbi midarwa yongdiga yusre. Da yinbi ne kam diliya sungbi madabi ngobo ye di, ene jizumi yudoji korangi shebe, ba madabe ngobo yedi teins ane shenda de ane lu shengi shebades da ran lu sena da do jizum yudo korang ki shebe lu ki madabe ngobo yege chan den da de yin song che zang da di ane dan dona 디 마이바 양 티둥 야선 디나로 양 티 신다지 나로 가르송 알았으나 디게 마다병어버게데 봉고예 마다병어버게데 마바나 되는 거 유베 태도 또 메사지 근데 송요 아래 데미도베 윤제데 다 당기 공도 슈바나신 아나 상게 줌된 데기 다볼하지 롱덴베기 노지그 나로래야 아나 코르마다 병어버게다 태와지 용거레스제 롱덴베 이미 인장 다 거규베 다 진주 남다를 쉐위미나 아니 넘버 타버를 쉐위미나 아니 가수래 라바르도 디나는 잡아지 러브도 총이 이사래 러브도 총으로 비슷한데 쉐위미나 되니 가수다 마다 병어부 기본데 봉고 유스 다 this 티 신다 지난 되니 송아
When the Buddha Bhagavan predicted the Dogpo Rinpoche Karmapa, he made these predictions in 2 or 3 different sutras. And when he made the prediction, he said that in the future, in your retinue, there will be some who are connected with the 8 impure things. And so that is why it is said here, that because there are some people who may become connected with the 8 impure things, that they are listed here. Now, with these 8 impure things, there are different ways that they are identified in different places. But here, this is the manner in which the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorje identified them. So this is the Mikyo Dorje's tradition of this. Others have different presentations. Those are slightly different traditions. But this is our own traditions, or the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorje's tradition is this. And so within the 100 short instructions, these 8 are also mentioned in other instructions in the 100 short instructions. And in those instructions, it says that if you do not give up these 8 impure things, then you are not included among the ranks of Kajupas. And so here, this is in particular because it is said that there would be in the future people who are connected with the 8 impure things in the retinue. And so if you are a pure follower of the Kajupas, and especially if you are monastic, it is important to give up these 8 impure things. And this is what is described in others of the instructions.
다 제장마 다로 카시행에리아 아는 게데 가서디 거주 몰람다 팅가디 정면이야 다다 팅즈 마데나 저도야 간담 거주 몰람 걸리양에 샤봉아 마르봉아 걸리야 지 가서에다마 announcement 에는 저민도 다 가서에 캡자스는 저민도 다 간다 make a suggestion, note, make a note. 다 간다 든지 제브레. 디급리야. 아니 디셰 규정으로다 마다베 뭐뭐 게사디 고 셰셰 규정하래. 이내야 디제랑 예 게서 잡는 방법이 고송. 다 디체네 디기 announcement 체네 로망부 친사래. 제자 로망부 게서 잡는 방법 가도. 가시야 가르쳐도 있잖아. 다그 디 우진틀레도 지그 엠베샤 마바나 그주바 말했어 그랬다. 오케이. 디 그주바 말했어디 예 랍샤 디는 게 말해. 다 미주도지 송샤버제. 다 대양 그주 디버 미도베스 그주 디 not included in the 그주 sort of lineage or something follower 다 간다 든지지 중물에 다 간다 디는 내가 체스케미도 다디 미주도 디나 소요 얼마도베 네 아이디어로 체제 더 그런 인지 미지 샤방 오래 샤마바는 그런 거 주에 말했을 텐데 라위아 말 이내 미주도 지기 가르소요 알선다 마다 병어버지 봉고예 마다 병어버지 마바는 거 주인데 또고 메스제 됐소요 다이미네 다 텔레베지 가르소바 양배 구이 양아를 지다 독반을 지 니삼 다나에 다면다 마다란다노다 다 고야잖아 거주 베베 follower number 타반을 지 다간다 가수에 베네 지주 밀러를 지 더보다 된제기 베 가수에 세대 료동을 치 다나시 천주기 셈기베 베유 정대바 and the lama mugu tempo yedeba tinji kansa ji teacher be fully dedicated somewhere be teacher be the karso be lo yeze lo dong chingi ji mi ji ngwen xie be yimina mata be ngo be je pon ji chena kola kala khabu ingi mare le la bru jingire ko ren xin pon ra jingire da yin ji dang gi je zang ge yu be number da ba ji che go na a de xiao ra ji dang ge yu che go da de cha 다지 구 양보를 지지신 되는 저는 좀 딱 한다 되게 제가 말다 이나게 지다디 콜샤디 당연 대세션.
A few years ago, at one of the Kaju Milnams, I can't remember exactly which one it was. At any rate, at one of the Kaju Milnams, I did speak about the topic of vegetarianism, giving up eating meat. I spoke about it. You could say it was an announcement or something, but really it's like making a suggestion. And so I did make that suggestion. And at that time, I did speak a little bit about these 8 impure things that at that point. Now, since then, many years have passed, and over the years, I've heard people say various things, and some people have even said, "Oh, that." Orjin Trinley Dorje says that if you don't give up eating meat, then you're not a kajupa. Now, it wasn't me who said that. It was Mikya Dorje who said that. It's Mikya Dorje who said that if you do not give up these 8 impure things, that you are not included among the Kaju lineage. So it wasn't my idea, and it's not like I said, if you don't give up, you better give up meat, or else you're not a Kajupa. And so now when Mikya Dorje talked about giving up these 8 impure things and said that if you don't give them up, then you're not included among the ranks of the Kajupas, he did say this, but there are different ways we can interpret it. There's the strict interpretation, and then there's a looser interpretation. And if we take a looser interpretation, then you can say that if you do not give them up, then you're not a truly pure Kaju practitioner. So a truly pure Kaju practitioner would be someone like Lord Milarepa, someone who completely gives up any attachment to this life, someone who's truly developed bodhicitta within themselves and has a 100% devotion to their Lama. In other words, someone who is fully dedicated and who has not a shred of attachment to this life. For such a practitioner, it probably wouldn't be all that difficult to give up the 8 impure things. But that is something for those people who are truly pure Kaju practitioners. But for other Kajupas, we can be a little bit more relaxed.
딱 간다양 예사대 간다 지당 샤 사와 잠시다 교리스 라도야 가라 가버봐 거주 라마데 고마딘데 거주 라마 고마즈나나 샤충이 망고 있기래 다 드린주산에데 샤샤바 잠시디 교리스 고만 딱 간다야 더다디 가르소르스나 다 조조디 나라조 최냠스 랭게 나라조 뇌네 다지 삼로주 동고도 승예디 qabli lab과 준선 가르스나 조 나랑 조와시 되었다 신다도 샤서 예버데原因名也他就接对给要嘛的他做的나랑기别가르소다 나랑기 다 가르소다 규수에서 말로 나랑기 내다로 뒤토하는 바 드셔를 슈디게 요아래 다데 가르스나 지당다 그래서 나오다 다지 참여하고 오래 엘라바도 가서 지게리 용게 제 지게리 요딩게 장수베 마치 규야래 아니 지 소자 망부지 소자 두류지 베사 차와 망부지 나란주지 카세 체도 니마다 말으시베 가수에 수도 제대로 여버지당 아니 가수에 나주 냥되게 여버지디 오세브시라래 따티 의니 세브 찍시 니바데 가라했잖아 니바데 땅 안주 가수에 담바 투지신게 거진을 때네 이제 감순기 심지에 탐지 려야지 파담 많이 두시 상부게 여러분들 지기 고급을 총 드레인 이제 감순 파담 많이 두시 소수게 만드는 다 간다 심지에 탐지 대화된도에 봐 동해 전도에 봐 지구인 대비지 인베지기 딱 가더라 고도르지 아주 충분해 때 중보점도 마세병 소수랑 소수면에 이비냐 심지에 탐지 대화 나랑 그 두고이 동해 세아데 주인에 나랑 그 지기 인제제 드리지기 배 아주 가서다 담제스네 장도 야나 드리지기 배 쿠르부지 내요래 딘니베들 다드네 인두스탄에 아주 드리지 쿠르지 렘베 랭게 야디 쇼르드네 야디 야디 가서디 야지 가서야 샤사들 삼부 자와는 마담치 배 사장을 제샤나 대디스 좀도스 지 삼부 동과야 쳐도스 람상 방사데 내당 가르게 우만 당부 럽드네 인지미지 방고 예슬라요 말에 다가나 아주 직디 삼부 동과야 지렌도스다 디 드가스 배 사장을 제네 샤레민도스 땡 아주 삼부 동과야 지 큰순 제과야 럽지 딘디지기 내당 차도마도 딜레라버지 레민도스 the train was anti Junzetene, the sound of quiet chairs.
Now, what I'm meaning here is that it's difficult to say that just because you eat meat means that you have a fault or a problem. There are many great masters, great Kaju masters, who have eaten meat, and so it is very difficult to say merely that eating meat means that you have faults. But eating meat is something that all of us who practice the Dharma really do need to think about and think about carefully. And so when I spoke about this, I was primarily thinking about the way I lead my own life. I can't really do anything about how other people lead their lives, but in terms of thinking about myself, there are some reasons for this. Now, the first of these is something that many of you all know about, and especially those of you who come from abroad. Every single day, there are many thousands and thousands of animals who are killed to feed us, or who are subjected to terrible conditions in order to provide us food. This is something that is very clear to us. So this is the first thing that we have to consider. And the second thing is that because of the compassion of our teacher, the Buddha Bhagavan, we have this opportunity to think of all sentient beings in the three realms of samsara as being our parents. And not only is it that we think of our parents, we also have the chance, or even if we don't think of all beings as being our parents, at least we have the opportunity to remember that all sentient beings are the same as we are in wanting to be happy and in wanting to be free of suffering. Not only do we have that opportunity, we often we make the commitment that we ourselves are going to do everything we can to bring happiness to sentient beings. We say, I am going to do everything I can to free sentient beings from suffering. So we say, I am going to do this. We make the commitment. We take the vow. We take this burden upon ourselves. And so that is the second reason. And so now that once we have taken this vow, or as someone has taken this vow upon ourselves, if then on the side of doing that, without thinking anything about it, we just go ahead and eat meat, then that is not okay. It is something that we need to think about very carefully. Now, I did not say that we need to immediately give up eating meat. I understand that it's difficult to give up eating meat. But I did say that we need to think about it. So we do need to consider what it means and thoroughly think through the reasons, or think through eating meat. It is not easy to give it up, but we do need to consider the reasons.
지당 아주 디 베베기 디 가르르다 베발레야 슈스르베 생 슈스 생 생이로 드리죠래 데가라 샤디 니지젠디즈 샤사오르 니지예베디 샤사오르 녜고마디 춘춘거디 디망 고뇨데 니지예베디 샤사 가르지 쓰기나서마 고마즈 다 제마 신의 디 고르츠에서 다이나 딜레라문도 다디 간데레사나 다 베나지 양 참선 가르스나 베나 디 간데레사나 수부 내단 베나 참참 베나 뒤에 나로리아 샤사초바 나와요레 샤카시지가요레 다 지당 시제 차네 샤 사초요다 넘숨 타베 샤사 랑게 체들 세베 통대 토스 메바지 고르다 다디 디스가나오레 다 진짜게 통대 수수 체도 세베게 응세바 응어서 마통바 마퇴바 다간 도바 메바 딘디지 샤지 사난 저거 아래송다 다 대양 알아도스 바다지 세벤 지당 근데르 지나스 다 대 조조 가르소에 갤론 네바르부 딘젤리야 나와 마도베 지 근데르 지나스 대지 다지 제야지래 셨다 다 간다냐 수수 수비 내당 왕 샤사고야 집에나 수불데 프로틴 섬으로 디상 프로틴스 다 벽에 다 지가르스도 다 수부주스로 만당에 내당 토냐 가시 마사카메르 내용도 와. 다 근데 마사카메 좀 거리야 사고로 받아. 서두산에 다 남주인 미샤사서 제 산 드만스다. 디두산 샤서루 민다와지 제 사고레스. 간데 사고레스는 샤딘 듄데 데마나인데 서마다 데마나이나 보바나이나 과지 딘데 다데 뉴데 람산 사요 마르스 니지 샹보 튠지 공고르스 지리 심제 탐제 라버도 되니 다 가주레디 가수 심제 다샤 가주레 데데 다데 간서 거다데 디 튠주텔이야 미치 니지 공고르스 니지 공 다 니지 검사에 제래야 에너지 상계기 배 청한돼 안다나신 신다데 미세 샤이체도 딕종게 아들이요 디순데 디순데 사회 제라 가르쳐서나 파이 마이 샤다 부이 샤이 누시 샤나 사우르스 마이 샤이 바지다 부이 샤이 벤 누시 샤 사우르스 다디 디 설루지그래 다들 중지요 디 중대 지시하는 만들 개민도
In Tibetan, of course, we do have a saying, and this saying is that compassionate people eat meat. Now, when I was young, I heard a lot of people saying this, compassionate people eat meat.
Should eat meat.
Should eat meat.
Yeah.
And later I
became... not should. I don't know. Maybe it should eat the meat.
Maybe it should be should. Okay. Yeah. So compassionate people should eat meat, it is said. Now later, it's only later that I began to really understand what this means, but it is not easy to do this. Now, in general, when we think about this, for monastics, in the Vinaya, it's not it is allowed to eat meat, but it's said that there are conditions. The meat has to be pure of three things for you to be able to eat it. And if it is not pure of those three things, then you are not allowed to eat it. And these three things are that you must not suspect that it is, or that you must not have seen, heard, or thought that it was killed in particular for you to eat it. And so if you think or suspect that or see or think or hear that the meat has been killed for you, then you should not eat it. Now, when I think about this, it seems to me that it's primarily for bhikshus who are ill, that they are allowed to eat meat. And for others, then it's difficult to say. It's something that we have to examine carefully. Then there are also people who need more nourishment, who need more protein, or the various nourishment you get from meat. And for people there are some people who, if they do not eat meat, have great difficulty nourishing themselves. And if that is your condition, then of course it's necessary to eat meat. But when you eat meat in these situations, you should not just eat it in an ordinary sort of way. There's actually a particular way that you should eat the meat. And so then when you're served meat and the plate is put in front of you, the plate or the bowl or whatever it's in, you shouldn't just dig in and eat it right away. Instead, you first need to meditate upon compassion for one session. And you need to meditate upon compassion for all sentient beings in general. But you especially need to meditate upon compassion for this particular animal, this particular being whose flesh is in front of you. So you need to meditate upon compassion for them. Then you should recite the mantras of the Buddha's name, as well as mantras that can help purify misdeeds. And then, only then should you start eating the meat. But when you start eating the meat, you should not just, you have to think about it in a particular way. You should think of it as being the meat of your mother or your father or your child. You should think of it, eating it in that way. And so it's when you think of it as being your mother's or your child's eat, then that is when you can eat.
파다 부이 샤칸데 사르다티 사디 살루 다데 둥지 샤나마도 디 다디 칸데 사우스 다디 디 부이 샤데 칸데 사우스 다디 디 삼로 다 데다 서유 데다 냠도 지 용사마레 데 칸데 사 둥지도 데 둥데 주버군이기 검보난도 둥디 야우도 주버년베 벽이 년반 순간난 루번년백 공개 가르송도 쓰다나 엄마 룸바질이야 템바 침부시비 때문에 템바 때는 로또 민 서주 많이 무기 중발했어 드네는 자나데 미잔질이야 아바 겐고지 아마 겐고지 보지야 보로 주지 로춘지잖아 다 서주 메두사나 다 가르쳐서나 다 서주자는 메두사나 아바 아마디니 겐고니 그 삼레나 가르쳐 다 녜니지 신이 되게 다 샤데드니 부들라 저고 삼 가르쳐나 부들이야 자와야자 시주기면서 녜니지 시고 저는 신이 다 되게 샤데 부들 저고 삼 부디 삼레나 다 군이 아바만이 데레체나 담드마서 저다 나랑 신이 되고 상다 근데 다 타마르 두사네 다 부디 코랑 런시 잡res 런시 잡 이내야 코랑기 슈려야 이기지 지샤셔스 가르샤셔 디네 이기 디는 가르치주선 인지미징에 샤드 사고예스 내가 에 샤드 마서는 앞에 가서 시와라 되면죠 시라 믹좀 두사 말았다 기란이 체도 나시웨이 제자 인지미 사고 다 드네 인두사나 아마 아바다마니 마사나 민디 가르샤 부디 삼는 디 저와 인자 마사나 민디 사나 좋아지 가이 든데 사오르다 로 좋아 신부요야 대오요야 든데 셔도 말았어 샤사고 개베이네야 아주 든데 좋아다 루주 용화다 지 가르쳐다 인지게래야 되지 서봐 디마 가서 the more delicious the chibo marchi the karsa dimension karsa the long job kibo tong an ruchi the karsa
sometime enjoy it
so enjoy the that zero chingdo yushida dinde chedo mai ba ta kan dona so choya sam jibu chedo ta de ma se ka me ruchi chungna dinde chare dinde sunga ne jezang 다 되게 오늘 지 가수에 아주 시행과야지 인사를 삼정유.
Now, when you think about, well, how can we eat like our mother's or our father's flesh? How could we eat our child's flesh? It's really something we can't, we can't.
We can't imagine.
We can't imagine how difficult it would be to eat this. And so, there's no way to really comprehend it other than by telling a story. And so this is a story that comes from the stories about Drupa Kunle. So Drupa Kunle was like the greatest lunatic in Tibet, the greatest of the Tibetan lunatics. And so the story goes that once in one area there was a severe drought.
There are three.
Oh, so he was the greatest of the three lunatics in Tibet.
One of
the three lunatics from Tibet. And so there was this area, and in this area there was a severe drought. Because there was a drought, all the crops withered in the fields. There was nothing to eat. And so there was a great famine that happened there. And in this region, there were two parents, elderly parents, a mother and a father, and their child, a son who was young. And so at that point, there was nothing that they could do. They had nothing to eat. And so the way the parents thought about it is, it would be better if the two of us died. Then our son could have the meat. We could give the meat to our son. And they thought this way because they had such love, or you could say compassion, for this. At any rate, they thought that if they passed away, we can pass away, and then the child can eat. But then their son thought about it differently. He thought, there's no way I could do that. It would be better for me to die and give my meat to my parents so that my parents can stay alive. And so in the end, what happened is the son committed suicide. And but before he did so, he wrote a note. And he said in the note, I am committing suicide so that you can have something to eat. And so you must eat my flesh after I have died. If you do not eat my flesh, then my dying will have been in vain and have been pointless. And so you must eat my flesh. And so after this, when the parents found his body, then there's no choice. I mean, they have to eat his flesh, but there's just absolutely no taste, there's no flavor to the flesh at all. And so that's how it should be when we eat flesh. When we eat meat. We should not eat meat in order to enjoy it, because it is delicious. We shouldn't eat it because we want to enjoy the great flavor and savor what we are eating. And we instead should eat the meat only in order to keep ourselves alive. And so otherwise, we should not eat meat in another fashion. And so that is how we should think about it. That is what we should know.
다 드니센데 레라브자면도 다 드니지기 가르도 에너지 소소양이야. 다데 시엔 잠디 아유시다. 다디 드니두사 다 간다는 예사의 가르소스라. 다 간다 샤사디 지당기 가르소에 아주 티버체모 에너지 티버체 비출이야베 슈세 에너지 심전 탐세래야 에레베 가르소에 다 파다 마다 부다 다 드니게 벤 두시에 샤네 다 드니지게 아주 지 드니게 냠내 치게 증외는 셰비미나 지 삼동와를 지레샤 삼버르지 디 계점으로지 다디 능중 제네 샤메바 다 삼동와 제 임베다 다 제네 창레 다 창고는 게 미제사스 게민도 지당기 다 창다 샤드 지버를 임베다 지당그 창사데 창라 세바만 임바 창라 세베 왕게 창라 베 차베 로메베체 다이민의 참선양 베 소수 창 통들 자는 매비체 다이네야 야 임지르 딘제기 지 창들의 통구레사르보다 딘데야 베베기 트래디셔널 맨 기저다 아디 웨스트는 기저 말다 삼사가르 맨 가셔서 주산 창통고야로 딘데 맨게 따서마르 맨디마 따야리야 아니 창통고야 딘데 기저 왔다 딘데 인두산 디두산에 수수 창통도 자와르 매브체 딘데기는 창통도 매베 왕게다 창통부 이미나 아버지진 예버시다 메디베소지 셰마도베 엔다 간다 창라베 차베 왕게 이미네 예버여 되버스 다 간다 너나 가수에 망보지 샤다 간다 가수에다 샤다 창다 디주기다 예바데 좀 창으로 아주다 나래 지진 장주 규체야래 당에 망보시다지 셰 과스 게민도 단 너나 가수에 니나는 송대베 마다베 응어보 예디 아주지 삼동과야 지당 지sem을 샤고야 지임자
So what I mean here is that when we eat meat, if we are someone who has entered the tradition, the path of the Mahayana, someone who has begun to think of all sentient beings as their father, or their mother, or their child, for someone, in terms of someone who practices in this way, it's really something that we need to carefully consider. It's not just something we should gloss over on a surface way, but we really need to think about this carefully. Then the next of these impure things is alcohol. And I don't really have much in particular to say about alcohol. I think it is similar to eating meat. So if we have to take alcohol, but we have no craving for the alcohol, then if we occasionally we have to drink alcohol, and we may not, if we drink it without any wish or any desire at all for the alcohol. For example, if we are taking medicine, there are several Tibetan medicines, not Western medicines, but there are Tibetan medicines where you have to take them with alcohol. Otherwise, they don't have any potency. So if you have these medicines that you have to take with alcohol, then there's no way, then you take the alcohol, but you should do it without any craving. If you have no desire or craving for the alcohol, then I think that there is no real fault for taking it. But if you are drinking out of attachment or out of craving, then I think there is a fault about that. So there's really not a whole lot that I can say about this. In terms of the faults of meat and alcohol, these are things that you all probably know better than I do, and there's not much need for me to say too much about them. And then there are the rest of the 8 impure things. And so these are things that you need to think about and consider and keep in mind.
다 개종 취시사 비메 개심이 제 다디스도문에 가수에 남슬래한테서 개심 시작해서 다 조조디 나다 대징에 지시해서
Now, the text also talks about the 4 qualities that make a spiritual person, and these are extremely important for us to practice.
다치당기 가수라다 아주 최사디 아니 최거다人心的 차와매버스는 장도 시와스는 장다 되지면에 다 차와매버스아디 미신달리아베 가수를 never 마게 점시겐 차와매베 고쳐요만다 차와매버스아디 조조 다지 체외 규디 가르스나 단 되자시란 디모숨 다조 되자시란 디모숨 녀모 도숨디 아주 귤이야 예 친절이야 간다지 아주 체외 사변스는 장도 체외기 다 녀가 차와차가 녀가 그 뒤에 유예버시 드리비 인두산 디균전 때네 다 내송 돼야죠 베지 초와라 라르미 초와 사데 상말로 오늘 지 아주 녀모 투숨디 에네베 괭릭체 대지 아졸이야 마고 미고 바지다 땡 아졸이야 이제 가르쳐다지 뇌바쟁기 뇌베 정신진이 바르베 가르쳐다 무진세버 여바지다 안다는 신기 다가다베 초와 nombre je ba che che de ji to ne nam gyu ne de ji ta kan da system li ya zhong da re ji te du chung yi bi na an de ji ge zhong chue xi sa de yam zu lian to ya re ji ba ji yong do ka ba de sam cheng yi
Now, when we talk about Dharma, the nature of Dharma is not harming, and it is peace. So not harming. And when we say not harming here, it doesn't just merely mean not inflicting harm, but it also, that's not what we mean by non-violence or non-harming. Rather, there is non-harming refers also to the seeds of this. There's the desire, aversion, and delusion in our being. The three poisons of the afflictions, the three poisons that are present. And from the moment that they are present within our beings, then we have the seeds of causing harm within ourselves. We have this danger that at some point we will cause harm. And so when we talk here about not returning anger for anger, what this means is recognizing the faults of the three poisons, the afflictions, knowing what those faults are, and thinking that we do not need to do those, and clearly identifying their harmful nature. And so when we do that, and then we have a strong feeling of this, then at that point, I think it is difficult for us not to actually practice the four qualities of the spiritual person.
다는 신의 니주토는 게 시에비미냐 오늘 미신다 저 수소소리야 컨트롤라베 참리야 수수지 셈 나도 봐봐 첸델이야 랭캡토비나 다디 가서지 소소 얘가 터버리지래 시야마도 미주 주 컨트롤라 소소 컨트롤라 다들이 지리스다네 된담래야 소소이네 판과 녀디가 얼버다 단 근데 컨트롤라 람베 그돌이야 그래서 가리네 제시비래 팀계기 내가 담데 제시비래 드네 인주사 된도 소소라 방과 마도베 소소리아 제가 매비미 드네 디균전데네 다 우리 니즈고 털려야지 소소 다 개변 삼다면 의미네야 컨트롤 말하는 소소 개변 체여버지 당 컨트롤 하는 소소라 개변 매버지 다들 우리 니즈 털지 이말에 아 다들 인주사네 디균전데네 아주 남균이 되게다 간다 awareness and around 다 고도는 좀 과디 계십시다.
If we think about the nature of, if we think about this in terms of the nature of things, if someone gets angry at us, and then instead of getting angry, we are able to let our minds relax a little bit, and then make a response. At that point, it's we who are victorious. It's we who have won in that. Instead, if the other person gets angry and we get angry in response, in actuality, we are the ones who have lost. Because when you get angry, there's nothing that you won't do. There's the danger that you will do something illegally. And so actually, at that instant, you have lost. You have not won any sort of victory. And so this is something that we need to think about. It's something we need to understand. It's something that we then need to practice. We have to remember that when we do not respond with anger, then we have the profit. Or excuse me. If we think about this in terms of the profit, way we profit from it, we can also understand it. If we do not respond with anger, then we are the ones who win the profit. But if we respond out of anger, then we do not get any profit. So this is something that we need to think about. It's something that we need to be aware or understand, and it's important for us to have that.
제장 단 도나타 도도르데 가르샤도 사나타 최지시에이네야 다디 가수에 랑게 규데 자르토바지다 뇽몬 뒤에 탑수 조토바지 최니시베나 다가난 신기다 랑게 규데 자는 뇽몬 뒤에 탑수 조토바지 제나 마도 다 최망 보슈슈슈 니마질다 최기 가서 파 가서다 다들 인지기를 가느라고 하는데 최 탭스 말하면 다들 최 만다를 제다 최다 가르쳐 든지레스다 다 최다 나랑게 망보 쉬비인스 다간 든지레스다 미미세케요 말해서 알지 차네 에네 가서 미세지 최데 오늘에 뭐 니즈 토리아 최게 배 펜바 대투야데 깔아가고 싶으랬대 깔아가고 가르쳐면서 소수기 최 지구 니고 배 최 근데지 타바에나 남산디지 가르래 고쳐야지 다 안에 라랭고 토리아 뭐 토리아 라랭 마다르자 다 되게 엔 최사데 엔 망도 최 가지 쉬베는 대지지 다 가르다 지파 바 가르다 지 코메 소메를 차려야지 다 연구도 와 드네 뉴스단 디준젠데네 인지 민지게 다 가르래 최뭐 가지지 시에비나 뭐뇽이 해봐요 말해 한달에 수수 강한 시에베디 수수 규대자 안 대베 녀모베 녀모는 저토버를 체베입니다 아부 연구를 성도
And so the main thing is that when we know one single Dharma teaching, there's one Dharma practice that we do, then we need to incorporate that into our beings, and it needs to become something that is an antidote for the afflictions. If we do two Dharma practices, we need to incorporate them into our beings, and they need to be a way that we can tame the afflictions. Other than that, if we just keep on requesting more and more Dharma teachings, we get more and more and more teachings, and then someday it's just going to be like we have an overabundance of Dharma, and then there's nothing special about any of them. We've taken all of these Dharma practices, but none of them have anything special about them. There's just too much of it. And then at that point, in terms of the real nature of the Dharma, it's really difficult for it to be able to bring us any benefit. And so the main thing is that if we just get one or two Dharma teachings, then we need to incorporate it into our beings. We need to really grasp it and understand that and actually be able to put it into practice. If instead of doing that, we just get more and more Dharma teachings, then there's no limit. If there's no limit, then at some point we just have too many. There's an overabundance of them. And so here, it is not a question of the quantity or the number of Dharma teachings that we have. What's important is that whatever Dharma it is that we know, that we incorporate that into our beings and that it become an antidote for the afflictions.
다이네 마케지시아 베나 간다부지마 케지시아 레나브레 이나 냠네 지도 가라네 가라하고 야래 가라네 가라하고 누 요아레사미도 가라하고 누 데네 인두산에 아주 시에바 잠시기 이마 잠시 라렌다고 온다 데레 개바침부시다 야래 대양 안수시 베나지 녀모르지 땅 아주지 이제 녀모 도숨자지 녀모 도숨에 녀모 땡기 위해서 지금 라우샤 봐. 다 녀모 도숨 녀모 땡기 위해서 바지 녀모 도숨데 냠도 마지 가서 수수 녀모를 땡기 위해나 예배 천안으로 정데 은혜 셰비나 녀모 도숨데 에네 베진베 신도 배 가서야지 녀모 때아지 가서 진베 신도 다배 가서다 냠보대아마도 람산 녀모투 순간 냠도 배 냠보대네 가다 뭐 쇼버치아데 깔아 가보시다 인서성도 대야베 림베신도 다 대야다 당보 소소리야베 녀모 가르쳐야네 텔레베 소소이기 텔레베 르브제도 dim체 텔레야 냠보 강조르지 차데 개침시라리샤 다데 냠보 강조르지 사디 뭐 당연히지
But when we say this, for me, speaking about this is easy, but it's difficult to practice. It is difficult. It's definitely difficult for me to practice. So this is something where we should not be satisfied just by merely knowing something. We need to actually put it into practice. And so when we talk about the afflictions, the three poisons of the afflictions, and we say, "Oh, I'm applying an antidote for the three poisons," we can say, "I'm doing this," but how are we doing this? What is our experience of applying the antidote for the three poisons? Really, what we need to do is we have to really, when they appear, then at that point we really need to apply our awareness and we need to use the antidote. We can't just think, oh, we're going to gather them all together. We need to actually use an antidote for each of these poisons, and that is difficult for us to do. And so for that reason, we need to think about which of the afflictions is strongest for us, and when we identify what is strongest, then we need to really focus our efforts on that one, and then use whatever antidote we have for it.
배는 차샤입니다. 배는 요모 도수를 지시해입니다. 다 르샤 셰단 디무소예브체. 셰단데 나랑고 초와를 지리야. 셰단데 또 징외스야레라. 셰단게 견디. 다 콜디 견디 도와 섬버르 징외스예 야 디슬레라. 르샤디 참전 교회에서 교회에서 고된된시라 메데버 제상 고디스텔레 칼레 카. 디무사들 가린 하고입니다. 다지 아주 드시에 디무그 친이 샤람을 자치거봐. 다 디무그 친이디다 레베나 샤쇼봐. 이내 수수생그 나는 닝그 나는 디무스든 데레사르지. 다지 뭔지야르지 용국으로 봐. 다 디무스든 데레 디견 데레사르지 고로 문진지 고로 셈라. 데메디산다 레베나를 아 디무친이 잡잡잡잡잡잡선데 룽바 같이 셔야 되네. 대지 편도로 시작해야 되면서 제가 timu korang kari hama oche timu korang kari hama odu timu gitsin gyendi ko jachadar shene ka de gyendi kwarji gen ha ko ame bruchi jeza di junzen dene ngene korang nyomo be gyen ngesiale kalar kawada le lawada kawa gbo kurim do yusare sam tengdo.
For example, if we think about the three poisons of the afflictions, these are greed, hatred, or attachment, aversion, and delusion. And of these, the first of them, aversion, it's easiest for us to see the problems there. It's easiest for us to identify what the faults are. We can say, this is the problem, this is the fault of aversion and hatred. It is easy for us to identify. But with desire, then it's harder. Sometimes desire seems to us like there's a fault, and sometimes it doesn't seem like there's fault. It can appear either way to us, and so it's a little bit more difficult to identify. And then among the three of them, the hardest to identify is ignorance. And the reason is that most of the time we don't even really know what ignorance is. What is ignorance? We can't really identify and say what it is. We don't know what the characteristics of it are. We might read about it and talk about it and know in our brains what the characteristics of ignorance are, but when it comes to actually knowing it in our hearts and saying, this is ignorance, these are the faults of ignorance, then actually we have no idea what the faults of ignorance are. If we just, with our brains, we can say, oh, this is ignorance, and these are blah, 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 blah about ignorance, then this is not necessarily going to help us. We don't really know what the ignorance is, and it just gets, and we just don't understand it at all. And so I think that first of all, there is this sort of sequence of the afflictions in terms of them being more easier or more difficult to identify.
다가나 신기 다가르에 데레야 냠보 땡거베 임비네 야네 양도 베다 베나지 셰단르 지리야 냠보 땡거베 임비네 바지 남준데네 남준네 아주 단 데레베 냠보지 강타 지타섬 남준네 삼로단 따데르 탑시지 강타 지타섬 삼단 다간다 지 가수에 민세메바 도스바 삼로 땅체 드니지 셈리야 가수에 간다르텔이야 냠보지 강타 치다 삼버지 드니지 삼단 대비미나 에고 림베 징원에 드니텔이야 냠보대야를 쉬운거래 셰마도베 엔다디 냠보지 중난지 마중난지 버르지 다 데르 샤샤나 냠보디 뒤나면 녀로 지금만에 지 라메 마셰네 송샤베 어디 녀무 비념분데르다스 송샤바데다 베제나는 예데버디기 고쳐만 베제나 예데버디 베제나 예브라 라마르 예브데 라메 토르 야르마도 라메 토르 예브데 소솔 수숙 sab제동 머바 다 소솔 요고 거르바다 소솔 요고 뒤산에 다디 라메 송샤바데다 베제나는 예데버디기 팽거 말에 다 소솔 귤이야 간다르 탑섬 다 리버르지 고고아레 다디 리버디 용알이야 남준데네 아주 탑시 유고 지루체 드니지 다 간다 셈리야 간다 퇴녀 첨부지 여비지당 다나시 텔야 베 동화 잡으러 드니지 총나 찌타서 말아보지 드니지 동화 잡으지 여비지 남준네 소수기다 내가 간다 셰비네 니한테 녀모 베녀버는 조고 맨로 니한 조고 맨로 삼아보지 다 강갈로 소수기 자와찌든지 셰비네 탐체베 녀모베 녀뷰 간 뽕투 버르지 다 간다 드니지 총부입니다. 에네 신에 갈리갈리지 녀모 발에 녀모 대한사 중고를 마다베 다가스 대대나 안에 다지 용거를 삼바르지 다지 믹좀 대대나 지 레용거를 삼바르지 야마라지 가르소에 바 곰르 잡데 레용거를 삼데 지 바지 갈라 가버지 인사를 삼창도 the Tuesday is in Gendo, the Commons. Our time is over, I know. I'm sorry. I know.
And so, so similarly, we need to actually apply the antidotes for the afflictions. For example, with hatred, when we want to apply the antidote for hatred, this is something we need to think about all the time. What are the antidotes for hatred? What can I use? What method? What is the best way to think about it? We need to keep this in mind day and night and think about what is the best antidote that I can apply for the hatred. What is the best way? Is there another method that I can use? And if we think about it, then at that point it will become we'll be able to actually apply it as an antidote. Otherwise, if we sort of think to ourselves, well, if I come across an antidote, that's great. If I don't, well, that's fine now. Well, if we think it that way, then we're never actually going to be able to apply the antidote. When the Lama says to us, okay, this is the antidote for hatred, or if we read in a book, it says, this is the antidote for hatred, that doesn't help us. What it says in the book is just what's in the book. What the Lama says is something that the Lama has in their mind. These are not things that we have in ourselves. We need to actually, and just because it's the Lama has that antidote or because it's in a book doesn't mean that it's going to help us. We need to really take great interest in finding a method that we can use as an antidote for the afflictions. And we need to do what we can to see what we can do to bring it out. We need to have great interest in our mind and constantly look for different ways that we can find antidotes for the afflictions. whatever task it is that we are doing, we need to think to ourselves, is this something that can become an antidote for the afflictions? And so we need to spend all our day, and whatever it is that we're doing, we need to think about, is this something I can use as an antidote for the afflictions? And then when we group all of these together and set them on the afflictions, only at that point can we really say that we are applying the antidotes for the afflictions. Otherwise, if we just sort of kick back and relax and say, okay, maybe the antidote will come or not, and just close our eyes and say, maybe the antidote will come, or do some sort of meditation, maybe the antidote will come to me, it's going to be difficult for it to work like that. And I'd like to beg your pardon, we've gone a little bit over time.
Chinang Jungwa Chube Gyugen Ge Ngama Chabe Mijode Salu Yede Najo Jumbu Tsase Mojo Chaju Minya Gajen Chaje Sayo Meja Jushi Jeba Kebra Den La Seve Tama So Gajen Jude Nuzere Nyurdu Sheje Zene Jumgyur Je Medan Mime Jowa Dat Gyula Chanju Semjo Rinpo Je Ngange Gene Nuze Penju Jambe Semdan Dene Gyang Pyu Dawe Dege Bage Yune Jo Zosun Gyawa Zeje Dembe Konde gewe tsawa ganje ba daja lasan nambra gawe soda mimbe ndrevo ndro yoro je nangebo de choge zo tayen ro agula kundo